Welcome one, welcome all. Shalom Aleichem to all those joining us virtually now in person, on Zoom, on Facebook, and a later point in time. Welcome and Mazel Tov, as today we have concluded Hilchos Reitzeach and Shmiras HaNefesh, which concludes the 11th book of the Rambam, Sefer Nezikin. Mazel Tov. It is most appropriate to celebrate Sefer Nezikin and to move on to our next Sefer, to move on to Sefer Kinyan, on Tu B'Shvat. Tu B'Shvat today, when we move from the winter and we move from negative coldness into growth, into birth, into a Kinyan, into an acquisition wherein we become connected to Hashem. We moved away from Nezikin. This is the most appropriate day, Chamishasa B'Shvat. Mazel Tov, one and all. We are honored to have with us today a special guest. And he's with us here. And this is Rabbi Yossi Bryski. Rabbi Yossi Bryski, Shalom Aleichem. Welcome. We'd love to hear you. Can we get the unmute?
Aleichem Shalom.
Oh, Baruch Hashem. Here we go. Baruch Hashem. So first, if you don't mind just introducing yourself in your capacity, and why is it that we are having Rabbi Yossi Bryski, and what is your relationship with Sefer Nezikin, not as a personally violent individual, but just would love to have an intro. If you could just introduce yourself, please.
So I work with the Aleph Institute, which is more famously known for helping people who are already incarcerated. But my department has a strong focus on keeping people out of prison when it's possible to have them rehabilitate without the prison environment. So that's what we present to the courts around the country, a submission that is very comprehensive and convinces the court that we have a handle on the person's rehabilitation without the need for prison.
Okay, so we've just finished Sefer Kinyan, and it's not a secret that obviously throughout the Sefer, with the exception of an Ir Miklat, prison really isn't part of our lexicon as Yidden. It doesn't really exist in our Sefer. However, many of our punishments seem a little bit harsher if we've read through the book, and we're going to describe them perhaps in Sefer Shoftim in their details. Sometimes my kids actually enjoy those Perokim as the best Perokim when we get to read about Skila and Sreifa and Hereg and Cheneg. They love Tati. When are we getting up to that? When are we going to learn that? I think one can say that prison perhaps is a more it's a more lenient sentence. But can you give us a little background on the different perspective in terms of the way that we in Torah look at schar v'einish and the way that American law nowadays in this country does?
So starting with Torah, Torah's chesed, every einish has to have chesed. Has to have chesed. The central theme has to be chesed. To contrast, even in the criminal justice system, rehabilitation is one of the few sentencing factors. It's just not the primary one. And in Torah, the ikar point of a einish, some people think, and maybe this is what you took out of even Hilchos Tshuva, or that Tshuva is for people who committed an avera, and if he doesn't do Tshuva, he needs to be punished harshly by the Torah, and that's why the Torah has a whole list of harsh punishments. That's not the case. A person should do Tshuva, and if an einish is required to give a little nudge or a big nudge to push the person to tshuva, the Eibishter is just simply getting the person towards tshuva. So einish is never an end in itself. The einish is actually designed to help the person, and that's the reason why.
What about a deterrent? We have in the Torah many times that you meant that everyone's going to see this and they won't do it again. Isn't there an element to punishment that ought to be a deterrent? We make a carbon out of that person. If you're a teacher, you got to kick that one kid out of the class, and then everyone behaves themselves.
Your own is also part of the rehabilitation. There's another people. A simple perspective is that the Eibishter just wants to make an advertisement that this is not what you should do because these are the consequences. You don't want to be in this person's place, so watch out. That's not the case either. First of all, the punishment itself is rehabilitative for the individual, but even the advertising, the publicizing during when the people are coming for the Yom Tovim, even when the fact that when they're coming to watch this, that's part of the tshuva of the person. The person didn't just cause a pagam in himself and now requires an oynesh to get him back to tshuva. The person also caused damage in society. So when society is learning something from his Aveda and his consequences that are meant to rehabilitate him, he now reversed damage to society and became the tikkun of society ends up being to his credit. If he wouldn't have done the Avera and suffered the Einesh, these people wouldn't have learned the Laman Yishmu. So even that is meant to be the person for himself is gained. Not there's a rehabilitative aspect. And also, maybe what's more important in the criminal justice system, Lahavdil, is to teach a lesson to everybody else and also to incapacitate and also. But it's
that's very, very interesting. That's very interesting. You're looking at the deterrent actually as part of the tshuva process. Part of this person's tshuva process that's very, very interesting. That part of the tshuva process is that other people have to learn not to follow his ways. That's fascinating. Okay, but the bottom line is we do live in a country that does have prison. So how do we, do the crime, do the time? That's the thing. So here comes along Rabbi Brisky and is trying to have people not do the time. So sort of, if you don't mind presenting that perspective, if we live in a country and we're supposed to abide by its laws, and if you do the crime, do the time. So are you just a very good lawyer that's able to, we can hire you that sort of gets us out of doing the time? And is that really the right thing? Can you give us a little bit of that?
Sure. So just to be clear, the people that we focus on, even though Aleph is famous for helping to rehabilitate those that are already incarcerated, and they help people who are a danger to society and probably need to spend a decent amount of time in order for society to be convinced that they're not dangerous anymore. They'll help everyone. There's no one that is excluded from giving them tefillin and giving them kosher food and making sure they're getting what they need to do tshuva in prison. What my department is dealing with, and a big focus of Rabbi Boyarski's massive efforts to change the laws of the country in a positive way with the waves of reform that are taking place, is to ensure that those that have no priors, those that are charged with nonviolent crimes, those that are pleading guilty, basically they're saying, we know what we did, and Aleph is acknowledging to the court that they know that these people are guilty of committing those offenses. Then there's remorse and tshuva and a complete program that goes on for months, sometimes years, leading up to sentencing, after which we ask the judge for leniency, and essentially we're asking that the judge allow us to continue and not interrupt the process of tshuva that this person is going through. So whereas your average Chabad, like yourself, you're a shliach in Northern California, and maybe you have a bit more time to take people step by step, slowly, some move faster, some move slower. We have to expedite the tshuva process for an individual and turn their lives around within sometimes a year and a half, or sometimes just 6 months, and impress upon the judge that the changes have already occurred and have already been initiated. Please don't interrupt the process. But to answer your other part of your question, the Rebbe says, yeah, it's clear from the Rebbe's talks that prison is not part of the Torah. I'm not going to get into it, but there's lots of what people think are exceptions to the rule. They're not except. It doesn't exist. That prison is used as a punishment in and of itself. Okay, maybe for another time. But the main thing, what the Rebbe does point out after having
why don't you actually stop there for a second and talk about how bad is the prison problem in America? I mean, move away for a second before you go to the Rebbe's perspective and share that. How bad is this prison problem in America?
It's a huge problem.
In terms of the numbers.
Perhaps it's 25% of the world's prisoners find themselves in prisons within the United States. We have, as most people know, less than 5% of the world population in the United States. So we're heavily incarcerating people. It's a person commits a white-collar crime. He takes money that should have been invested in this place and instead puts it in the stock market, loses the money. This person is looking at 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. Very commonly, people who are sophisticated criminals and know how to pull off $100 million fraud as opposed to a $600,000 fraud are looking at decades in prison, and it makes that right now. It's interesting. The world is finally coming to terms with the fact that prison is shouldn't be a response to every single criminal act that exists in our country's laws.
So I interrupted you before. I'm sorry. You were about to share the unique perspective, please.
So the unique perspective of the Rebbe is that B'derech Klal prison is not just unnecessary. Prison is dangerous in the sense that we're telling people who probably need the most encouragement and the most benefit of free choice, and now utilizing their bechira to make good choices by restricting them and restricting their liberties. You're literally, it's a state of suspended animation, as Rabbi Lipsker likes to say. You're basically killing them for a period of time, even while they're breathing and alive, and therefore they must have a mission to fulfill, a shlichus. They can't do it because you're holding them back, and it's the exact opposite of a true rehabilitative process, a proper tshuva. And ultimately, the Rebbe does say that since we have prison, leider, we are in a country that is decent and it's trying its best to rehabilitate its citizens. And nevertheless, they somehow didn't come around yet, at least back when the Rebbe was saying this in the 70s. They didn't come around. Now it's already—
Is that when this started? Is that when the Rebbe addressed this in the 70s?
In Lamed Vav, Purim Lamed Vav is a famous Sichos where the Rebbe is saying that we need to bechlal, make sure that the prisoners are getting—
To your knowledge, is that the first time that the Rebbe brought this in a public forum in the 1976? Is that the first, to your knowledge? I'm just asking.
Oh, no, I don't know. It's the one Sicha that's fully dedicated to this discussion. So, and it shows up a lot. It just that I know that's one Sicha that I listen to on the way to a prison. It's always very encouraging to hear what the— and I go on Purim. So it's very encouraging to hear what the Rebbe is saying about how at the end of the day, Din Malchus Dina, this is what we've got. This is what we have to work with. The Rebbe, of course, saw that in 2005, a major jump took place. I'm not going to get into exactly how it happened in the law, that judges now have a tremendous amount of discretion, a lot of latitude now, where they can decide that even though the guidelines dictated a certain amount of time, like I said, 10, 20, 30 years, they can vary. There's a variance. They can vary downward. They can also vary upward, as some of you know, on the famous story with Shalom Mordechai, which is terrible. But in generally speaking, with most 90, I'd say a high percentage of judges, they will vary downward, meaning that they're coming to terms with the Rebbe's vision that prison is not the go-to. America may be proud that they're not torturing people like in the Middle Ages, and we came up with prison where the person's not being physically tortured or killed. But this is not the chesed u'verachimim at all. It is a certain form of psychological and emotional torture, and definitely spiritual torture. But the Rebbe says, this is what we've got. Let's work with what we've got in those situations where it's inevitable that the person's going to have to sit in prison. And the Rebbe tells us how we have to provide them with the tools necessary, first of all, to be able to do tshuva. And secondly, we should have in place what America actually does have in place: parole, clemency. The president decides to let somebody go. The governor of a state lets somebody go. All these kinds of various ways that we can assess and say, okay, this person has already demonstrated that they have been rehabilitated. Why do we need to keep them any longer? Now there's reductions. It's official now that there are the First Step Act, which was legislated, bipartisan legislation, which was very strongly pushed by Aleph Institute and Rabbi Moshe Margaretin from the Tzedek Society, I think it's called. This was legislation that actually allows for a tremendous amount of reductions based on people studying, people bettering themselves. So it's like the Rebbe's vision of it's dinner the Malchus Din, let's work with what we've got, but clearly implying that we need to change things. It's coming to be now. This is it.
Mm-hmm. There was a question posed by someone here, and I don't know if you can answer it. And I'm sorry for just throwing it on you, but we did learn, and we do have the concept that at certain times the Beis Din does have the authority to incarcerate someone for extended periods of time. And I think, is there within the Rebbe's worldview someone who is not safe to be within society? Does that person exist? And does there need to, what would from a Torah, from the Rebbe, what would he say about somebody who simply is not safe enough to be bein habriyos, to be within society?
There's very, very few times. It happens to be that there were different rabbanim of different times where, because they were restricted in their jurisdiction of being able to do, chiyuv misa, there were times when they were allowed.
But I mean, in our country today, what would be Torah's ideal situation for someone who is a clearly dangerous individual? Should that person be? We have capital punishment, we have malchus. I mean, or does prison have a place? I'm asking this: does prison have a place within Torah, within Rebbe? Does that exist?
Nope. The closest thing we had to prison was the Ari Mikla.
So what would we do with someone? What would we do with someone? What would we do with someone who's dangerous? What would we do with someone?
So in some instances, for example, if the person was to a point where they deserve to abort the mission, to abort the shlichus, because they've demonstrated that they're done trying to do their shlichus, and the shlichus was maybe shortened to meet up with where they end. Wherever they finished their shlichus was determined. Maybe another Gilgal will have to continue, etc. In those instances, you had such a people always give me the example of where they put him in the kippah, right? They put him in the place where but that was a form of misa. In other words, it wasn't chenek like your kids get excited about. It was the kind of misa where it just the way of misa was going to be done by incarcerated, but the incarceration wasn't the punishment. It wasn't we're going to lock you up and then we're going to let you out because we swapped up 10 years of your life. It was abort mission, and we can't do chenek and we can't do skilla, so we're going to do this kind of misa. So they had attitude, but they never. It's not even like it's mentioned. Maybe it could be. There were rabbanim of more contemporary times, I think, that they had no choice. There was a lot of white collar, theft going on, and they didn't have full jurisdiction to implement all the other aspects of what a bezdin would normally be able to do. So they had prison, and even then it was considered a yotzim in a klal. But the most prisons in the Torah are coming from parais, are coming from goyim, are coming as a holding cell, which doesn't, we do believe that the person.
This is fascinating.
Yeah,
fascinating. Okay, so fascinating. Thank you for this perspective. You probably have a dozen stories which you can regale us with throughout the evening or the morning or the afternoon, wherever people are listening to this. But perhaps any story that comes to mind that would be of interest in a way that you have enhanced, helped, bettered, and transformed a life, or any other interesting insight from the world behind the bars, which always has some people, it always piques our curiosity.
Since I think I can tell you a story from Northern California, perhaps.
Please.
So, there's a young Israeli woman who was pulled into, there were a bunch of companies, a lot of companies in Israel that were dealing with binary options, very complex kind of offense conduct, but it's really how do you call it? You have a company, and the people on top are giving you a script of what to say to the potential victims around the world, because you're calling people around the world. In Israel, it was not illegal. It was called gray area. I believe now it is. They changed the law. In America, it's illegal completely. It's sort of playing with stocks, but more like a gambling kind of thing, even more so than regular investment in stocks. Anyway, the point is, she gets pulled into this whole thing. Young woman, needed some money, so she goes and reads that script. And then she comes to the United States, and a lot of other people did at the same time. And
when you say read the script, just so I understand, she reads the script, meaning she's sort of encouraging people to invest in some sort of non
to invest, to sort of gamble whether a stock would go up or down, and if it goes up, whether it goes up.
In a script, she's telling people what she's calling people for this. Got it. Okay.
People making it sound like, I'll just one quick example. She'll say something like, the company is only going to make money if you make money. One of the most famous ways to lure somebody in. We're only making money if you make money. It's not true. They were making money either way. And the point is that she got pulled into this. And when she came to the United States, she was arrested. And this was out of Maryland. So this is for whatever reason, the victims mostly were from there. And so even though she had come to the United States, she had just gotten married to an American-Israeli guy, and it seems like she's ready to start her life. She wants to settle down, and now his family's encouraging him to maybe break up and get divorced because, hey, she's a criminal. We didn't know. She didn't know she was a criminal. She had no idea that what she did was being pursued by the United States. And the bottom line is that, I would say this is the most basic presentation that I've done. And I have to give credit to the people who work with me. One of them was a woman of 5 children, a mother of 5 children, and she sort of put the idea in my head, and not sort of, she gave me the idea, and I presented to the judge on the most basic level. I said, look, She has in her family, situation, early menopause is in the family. She's not going. The window of opportunity is closing. We sent her to fertility doctors. We had to get the bracelet. She had a bracelet, on the foot to make sure she follow her movements. She wanted to go to the mikveh. Rabbi Lapkovsky and his wife were encouraging her to go to the mikveh because of her interest in having a child, despite the fact that it was already close to impossible to have children, and we spoke to the judge, and the bracelet was removed. She was able to go to the mikveh a few times, but now she's facing certain prison because the person who got within this ring of people, the top person got a couple of decades, but within this ring of people on the lower end of this totem pole, you had 14 months was the lowest sentence. 14 months was a guarantee she's not having kids. It's impossible. The doctor said if she keeps the fertility treatments going right now, her chances are like 90% chance it's not going to happen. And then I think she ended up with at the end of the story, it's the 2% chance that she's having a kid. But you see where the story's going. Anyway, the point is that we told all these stories. They all end the same way with a mess. Hopefully, everyone should get benched that it should be that way. And we came to the judge and said, look, L'Shavas Yitzara, it's hard to explain to one, especially sometimes a non-Jewish judge. The Jewish judges could be even more difficult to explain it to. Torah says the first injunction of the Bible is you're taking a woman who did commit a crime. She just finished pouring her heart out and crying in front of you, Your Honor. And she is very remorseful. She turned her life around already, and she's willing to continue. But you're depriving her of the opportunity to bring another child into the world and to train that child to follow the laws of this country. You will have another citizen in this country following the law if you allow this person to continue her fertility treatments. The judge gave her 8 months, which is, like I said, the lowest that they give, and he gave her what's called a split sentence, which means she's going to serve for 4. She served a fraction of it because COVID hit right after that. This happened a couple of years ago, and she had 4 months of house arrest, which with permission to go to the fertility doctor. Dafke with the judge's official encouragement, he said to her, "I want you to be able to have a child, and you should not be deprived of it." And here you have a person who's not Jew, a Goyish judge who felt that this is what we're supposed to be doing with punishments. We're supposed to be encouraging people to be able to raise a kid and be able to do it properly. And she demonstrated her remorse. And I just came back from Oakland right after it was Isru Chag. I was still a little bit Simchas Torah, and I went to Oakland because they just made a bris. So it was a couple of years. Beginning of COVID, they made a bris, and like I said, there was at that point a 2% chance that she would give birth to a baby. And with help from other shluchim in Northern California, Rabbi Shmuley Reitman, who put me in touch with somebody who knows how to. We're even trying now to reduce her probation so that she should be able to focus only on raising the child and not have to do a lot of activity that we made her do in order for part of her rehabilitative process. Right now, the rehabilitation is coming from being a mother. She's a very straight shooter now, and she's raising a kid to be a.
This is a beautiful way to end. Yashar Kiyah. That's very, very special. And may Hashem give you long, healthy years to continue this holy work. And the only criticism is next time you're in Northern California, you have to say hello. Come by and visit. So with that, on that note, we'd like to honor you, Rabbi Brisky. If you would please formally conclude, we'd like to ask the moderator to please put up the last halacha in Sefer Nezikin. And we're going to now conclude Sefer Nezikin together. And we're going to move on today. Conclude Sefer Nezikin, please, Rabbi Brisky.
Okay, and let's give you one to the skala, or we're just going to do I forgot to ask you.
We'll do the first of all, it's on the screen. You can see it on the screen, or if you have a phone or whatever. We're talking. Go ahead.
Okay, so this is, the screen is small for me, but I'm going to use another screen. And it's Halacha Yud Daled, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah. Hasayne shenamar b'Torah loy me'umas ha'elam hu elam Yisrael. V'hei achi el Yisrael sayne Yisrael. How is such a thing shaykh? V'akasav v'yimer le'sis nesachicha bilvavecha. Amar chachamim gegain shara'o levadei sha'avar avera v'hisra b'ay v'lechazar. And it's a mitzvah l'sanei ad she'yaset tshuva v'yashuv mirishay. I don't know if you want me to translate, but it's al derech what we said before, that the only purpose of the mitzvah l'sanai is Achiyas Tshuva V'Yashav Mirisha. You see over here, this was, you wanted to, this is, I tried to use that as a springboard, this concept, this idea that even the sinna and even the einish, and Achiyas Tshuva V'Yashav Mirisha, V'afal Pisha Dain Lo Yasa Tshuva, Im Metzai Nivel B'Masai Mitzvah Litain V'Lifrekimai. We're not, he's not excommunicated because we have to throw him into prison now. We have to put him into Cheder. No, the regular standard need to help him is there. We have to worry about his concerns. This is everybody. Our nilvim al Hashem u'ma'amin. I don't need to see. I need to see that they should live, and prison is not living. So again, to connect it, the Eibishter really wants that we should have people v'chaya and making the right choices during the v'chaya, not when they're in a state of suspended animation. Thank
you. That was beautiful. What a connection. What a segue. Thank you very much. We're now going to immediately venture into a new sefer. And we're going to begin the first halacha, which is the first halacha mitzvah hamekach ein nivke b'dvarim. The Rambam tells us that if you want to sell or buy something, you cannot do so verbally. Even if the buyer and seller and there's witnesses there. Kate said, "Buy zani merchalach, yain zani merchalach, ev zani merchalach." I'm going to sell you this. I'm going to sell you this wine, this servant, this land. And we set a price. And the buyer says, and the seller, they both say, "Good." And the witnesses say, "Good, we're all in it." Is meaningless. It's as if nothing took place. The same thing is true when it comes to gifting, receiving, and gifting gifts. May the Rebbe should give us the strength that just as we finished and concluded Sefer Nezikin, so we should diligently study Sefer Kinyan. Rabbi Brisky, thank you so much. God bless you. And this is just the beginning of the conversation. I think when it comes to Shoftim, we'll get back and we'll continue it because I see many other questions and a lot more to cover. So thank you very much. Thank you to all the organizers, to Rabbi Cantor, to all those there who are watching. Hatzlacha Rava, good Nacht, good afternoon, good morning. Thank you very much.